This vlog will analyse skill versus capacity issues regarding speed and agility. This vlog will compare two athletes in an accelerating sprint start not from blocks, and then two athletes in change of direction agility drills.
Athlete A presented with a limited performance in her sprint start. This was determined to be due to a lack of skill after testing and analysis.
Athlete B presented with capacity issues in a multitude of areas, all limiting his performance in accelerating. Athlete C presented with a limited skill performance and struggled to change direction adequately in this drill. Athlete D had good skill level in this drill, however noticed were minor capacity issues that would need sorting in order to improve performance in this skill. The first part of this video will focus on acceleration. Athlete A has had limited experience with sprinting in the past. Athlete A's preliminary examination of a non-block sprint start shows adequate start technique. However, there is still improvements needed. In early stages, you can see that her rear leg triple extension and arm drive is good. However, her ground strike is still in front of her body slightly, increasing her ground touchdown distance, thus increasing her braking force.
As seen in this analysis, her foot is definitely in front of her centre of mass, and there is a struggle to fully extend her rear leg into a triple extension position.
As shown in this video, her hip angle of 93 degrees is a little low, meaning her knee drive needs to be increased to increase early stage ground reaction force and to increase velocity of touchdown, and this will improve the ability to overcome the previously observed braking forces. In order to check if these issues are skill or capacity based, Athlete A's capacities were tested. As can be observed in the video, her ability to get her leg parallel to the torso and ability to dorsiflect while in high hip flexion shows that there is no capacity issues regarding her musculoskeletal system in this movement pattern. This practice position can be used to encourage improvement in the movement, making sure that her ground contact is below her centre of mass and not in front. After a technique-focused training session, there were mild improvements in the athlete's touchdown position under her centre of mass. However, due to time constraints, there was not enough time to continue the training to make larger improvements. Here is a summary of the findings from the athlete's testing. As seen previously, her technique had more skill issues rather than capacity issues, and it is therefore recommended to continue focusing on teaching points and exercise suggested to improve further.
Athlete B presented with a limited performance in his sprint start. However, this was determined to be due to a capacity issue in his ability to hip extend and open out his hips in his stride pattern. Athlete B has previous experience with sprinting in later childhood and has coaching prior to today. Therefore, is expected to understand the basic technical demands of sprinting. However, his preliminary acceleration technique shows some issue in posturing and starting stance. As the athlete moves forward, it is noticeable how his stride length is shorter than expected. However, this does allow his ground strike to be under his centre of mass, which is a positive. Through further analysis, it can be seen that the angle of athlete B's hips sits at 81 degrees, which is too short for acceleration and loses force over these strides, which in turn means he has to take more strides over a longer distance. However, there needs to be further analysis to determine whether this is a skill or a capacity issue. Through examination of the athlete's capacities, it can be seen that the athlete struggles to triple extend his legs while keeping a flat back, and he also struggles to elevate his knees above the hip position. This further confirms that this is a capacity issue and not a skill issue. We also examined the athlete's squat technique, and can see there is tightness in his hips, and the athlete reported pain and discomfort in his lower back and in his hip joint when reaching in a low position. The athlete's shoulder mobility was tested as to see if there was a capacity issue for his arm drive. As can be seen, there is a restriction in the range of motion. Therefore, a likely capacity issue is the restriction of the athlete's latissimus dorsi, reducing his arm drive. These stretches were given to the athlete to improve his capacity issues, primarily targeting his lower back, lats, hamstrings and gluteals, as well as his hip flexors. Shown is a summary of the key points noted with athlete B. There is a clear restriction in the athlete's ability to produce force and acceleration, and the athlete needs to focus on mobility in his hips and lower back, as well as the surrounding areas of the capacity issues. The second part of this vlog will look at the agility in a change of direction drill.
Both athletes were given no cues other than to run to one cone and then to the other. Athlete C had no previous experience in agility or athletics prior to this filming. Athlete C had issue originally with her lateral deceleration and stopping position. As she reached the first cone, her back is rounded and her centre of mass is high, providing a narrow base of support. This prevents her ability to transfer force in the opposing direction to re-accelerate. It was also noted that on the lateral deceleration on the opposing side, that she over-supinates her right ankle, which becomes a danger of injury and prevents her from decelerating correctly. As can be noted in this clip, the athlete's angle to the floor is quite high at 58 degrees. This suggests that she isn't leaning forward enough and therefore gravity is affecting her run too much, which will decelerate her and increase braking force. The athlete does struggle to get her hips facing the direction she needs to run in. This means she loses force as she tries to turn, and this causes her to be slower in her re-acceleration. There needs to be more practice on each individual phase of the drill in order to improve the overall skill. There is a 90-degree turn, lateral deceleration, a 180-degree turn, another lateral deceleration with one final 90-degree turn. Athlete C practiced lateral deceleration to emphasize the correct stopping posture and position using a lower center of mass and a wider stance. This took some time to get used to, but after a while there was some noticeable improvements. There was a noticeable improvement over the small time period that the skill was practiced. However, more practice and coaching is needed and recommended in order for this skill to be optimal for the athlete. Here is a summary of Athlete C's key points. The athlete struggled with understanding the movement pattern with no previous history of agility training. There was noticeable issues with the rounding of her lower back and a high centre of mass. Athlete made improvements over a small time period available after teaching points were given and practice available. More practice and coaching is necessary to maximise improvements. Athlete D has had experience in sprinting, agility and athletics prior to today, although not recently. At first, this athlete's performance seems good, but after further analysis, there were some noticeable capacity issues limiting his performance. These will need to be fixed in order to improve the athlete's performances. The athlete had ideal foot position for change of direction so that the force applied could be more effective in the swing phase, allowing him to apply force quickly in the new direction. The second side was noticed to be better than the first, suggesting a limited range of motion in the rotation of his left hip. The athlete's running technique between acceleration phases of this drill also need improvement. The athlete gets upright very quickly, hitting angles of 53 degrees and 51 degrees respectively. This could be due to tight hip flexors as well. The tight hip flexors were also noticed to be a capacity issue as the athlete rounds his back each time he touches the ground, further confirming our first thoughts. Again, it is noticed to be much worse on one side than the other, however this time it's the opposite side to that of the rotational issue previously noted. The athlete's back mobility and hip mobility were tested with a lying supine twist. The athlete clearly has mobility issues here as he is unable to keep his back straight while rotating. This further confirms the mobility issues that have been suggested throughout the technique analysis. In order to improve, the athlete will need to focus on opening out his hips and increasing his range of motion to allow himself to lower his centre of mass on deceleration and keeping himself low enough on the re-acceleration. Here is the summary of the athlete's testing and analysis. The athlete was very capable with this drill at the start, however struggled with his hip mobility. The athlete's right side was worse than the left and the athlete rounds his back as he lowers his centre of mass down to touching the ground. In order to improve, the athlete needs to focus on increasing his range of motion and the hip flexors to improve.